So a few weeks ago, I set out a question, who wants to know about Claude Code? And I got a lot of responses. So obviously, a lot of you are interested in this. It seems like a lot of people have wanted to try Claude Code. They haven't gotten around to it, or they tried it out. It's not what they were hoping for or expecting. So first of all, we'll cover what it is. We'll cover how to really use it and make use of it, and where to make use of it. We'll talk a little bit about the Claude.md file, or I will in this presentation. And then I will focus a little bit more on Claude Code in GitHub and the command side of things. And then I'll touch upon planning and sub-agents and some final tips. I will give about a 20-minute presentation from me, and we'll actually have both Patrick and Galen will also give presentations because they've been using Claude Code also for, at least they're the people I know that have used it either the most or the longest. And so they have a lot of great things to say about how they've been using it, and you'll hopefully learn something at any level that you are, either really technical or non-technical, and how to make use of it. So, all right, let's get into it. So, what is Claude Code is the first thing we'll cover here. Yeah. So this is the essence or the loop of what the Claude Code agent is. You're probably used to Claude in the desktop app, or using Cursor as your main agent if you're doing any kind of coding. Claude Code has a lot of kind of a built-in loop, and I think the reflection is the main piece here. So let's just walk through this real quick. First, you start with the task. This is usually your prompt that you're gonna ask it to do. It could also come from a command, which we'll get into later, but effectively this is your input. Sometimes we do have a task list, but I'll get to that in a sec. Effectively, we'll execute that task, and then what Claude will do is, instead of just exiting like in a typical chat, it'll actually reflect on what output it got, and use that to determine, should I do another task by pulling it from the task list, or create tasks and add those to a list of tasks. And this list of tasks, I think, is one of the things that makes Claude Code a little bit special compared to say just using Cursor, because it'll generate a list of things that you can see that it's going to execute in order, and it'll check them off as it goes. And this is just naturally part of of how it's set up. And so this ends up lending, this is why Claude Code is slightly separate to just using Cursor. And where it'll really shine is when you have a lot of things you want it to do, and in a certain order, and you want to control that order to some extent, or understand what it's going to do and execute. That's where you really want to use Claude Code. And I'll get into more specifically what that means. But effectively, this is the loop that you have to understand. Like, this is what Claude Code is under the hood. If we dive a little bit into the do task step, effectively, when it's executing a task, it'll go through this think and tool call loop. The tools that it has built in are things like grepping, creating files, or any kind of bash commands effectively. And you can, of course, add a bunch of MCPs, so that can be called a web browsing search. It can be whatever MCP you like. There's a good context one, and we'll touch more upon that later in some other presentations. But this loop is what makes it really great. You don't have to repeatedly prompt it to say like, hey, do this, now do this. It will think through what it has to accomplish and just continuously operate on that. And the output is either a file or multiple files, some kind of text to the console, or some other command that you want it to execute. All right, so that's just a basic overview for those of you who maybe haven't tried it out or used it. Now we'll get into a little bit of ways to use it. So what I'll touch upon are the main ways that I end up using it in my day-to-day coding, and some ideas for you to consider. And then we'll hop into some more specifics about that. So the biggest thing I use Claude Code for is really ramping up on a code base, or searching through a code base more effectively. So I did some consulting work recently, and what would typically take an engineer or consultant like a week, or sometimes even a month, to really ramp up on your code base, understand where everything is located, or have somebody actually walk you through it, it's not really feasible or practical for a startup to spend time doing that, right? Especially when you need to just get something done, you need somebody who knows how to do that, to do it in your environment. Claude Code is amazing at helping you navigate and figure out where certain things are located, where certain processes, how certain processes happen, and it can do it effectively. Just does it on a set of files, which means if you have a multi-repo setup, you can pull all the repos into one big folder and then run Claude Code over all those folders. That way you can connect. I used it for my own tech that I was building. It's now gotten complex enough where I forgot, okay, how did I make this API setup in the back end? And how am I going to call it from the front end? Well, I just pulled them both into a folder, and that way I can ask it, okay, how do I make this connection? And it's able to do that really, really well. I also use it to sometimes refactor large files, and this is a use case that doesn't come up as much as as you keep a cleaner code base over time. But initially, you might have I start off with huge API endpoint files, for example, because I just want to store them all in one go. But obviously, you really want that to be really clean, really organized. And using something like Claude Code, where it can figure out, okay, I have to move this to this file, then I have to move this to this file, and having it break it down into tasks is something I think it does a lot better than Cursor, for example. Cursor's still good at it, but I feel have to be more explicit when you want to accomplish something like this. It can also generate files that require, it's really good at this actually, generating files that require information from lots of other files. So like I mentioned, one of the tools that honestly it abuses, that I'll get to later, is the grep tool, right? It doesn't have any other way to do search, so it just uses the regular command line search command. And what that means is if you're trying to make a README, or you're trying to make, what was the other example I had? Oh yes, when you want to distribute your API and you want to create a Postman collection, if you've ever done that, it's just annoying to create, right? And sometimes you need to look at multiple different files to gather all those endpoints. It's just annoying. If I don't want to even know where those endpoints exist, but I know it all matches up to router, Claude Code can go in and figure all those things out, pull it into its context, and then generate the Postman collection from that. And so this is another case where I think if you don't know what files to look for, which in Cursor you can select the files really easily, and it's really well done. So that pinpoint selection and operation is great in Cursor. But when you don't really know, or you have too many things to consider, Claude Code is a good option for that, especially when you have many things to look over. And finally, generating tests. I think that's pretty obvious. Everyone's used used AI at some point to generate some kind of test. But I think what Claude Code is really good at is if you have a test that maybe requires a couple of steps, or you have a test that might require just generating an entire document to test a very specific thing out. And I've done a lot of API work, so a lot of my examples are API related. But I wanted to it just had to see, can it run this function properly? And then it has to debug. That debug loop after it fails is something Claude Code is really good at, because it's able to come up with a task. Oh, the task failed, so it does this reflection, and it's able to then fix the issue and then retest it. And it can append all of those things to this queue of tasks, which is what again makes it really powerful. So I'm really hammering on that point of the loop is what makes Claude Code really special. And to sum it all up, this is the main question that I get asked quite a lot. What's the difference between Claude Code and Cursor? I think it sums up to this. Claude Code is really good at multi-step processing. So you have a large task you want to get done, it can break it down into subtasks, execute them one by one. I use it for starting projects constantly. Obviously, if you have seen, I post a new project every other couple of days. It's just because I'm able to create a really, really good spec, really good planning document, which I'll get into later, give it to Claude Code, and I just let Claude Code run freely, which is probably not great to do, but there's no stakes to these random side projects, and it's really good at doing that. And it's again because of that reflective loop. If there's a lot of complexity, this is what I mentioned just a minute before, where you have to pull in a lot of things from different files, it's good at doing that as well. And if you have a very long running process, I tend to prefer Claude Code because I think Cursor will auto stop after 25 tool calls. I don't know if that's a feature you can turn off. Maybe I'm sure there is some way you can get around that. But overall, I found that the Claude Code whatever prompt that they're using to allow you to do that loop is better set up for just running longer without failure. It will fail occasionally. It'll always happen to you at some point, but less so. Cursor is still really good, though, at solving specific problems, addressing very specific files or lines of code, because you can select those things very easily. If you have a single step or single task you want to execute, definitely go for Cursor. And if you really want to, keep looking and driving the development, or have it work alongside you, or really keep an eye on it, Cursor is better at that, just because you can look at the actual changes in the files very easily, accept those or reject them as they come, which is one of the major struggles that Claude Code has. It doesn't have the great ability to manage the edits and changes easily. Effectively, it's just operating and changing all your files. So if you want to do a Command Z like in Cursor, it's a lot harder. And people have come up with solutions for this. Like there's this, I don't remember the names of them now, but there are projects out there working on like, how do I set up an undo? You can use a...
Real quick, I mean, you can install VS Code extension and it will show you the diff.
Yeah.
And you can be like, don't do that.
Right. You can...
So like, there are ways to see it.
Yes, sorry. There's ways to see the differences. Yes, like you can connect it to into your IDE itself, but the more of the issue is like you can't go in Cursor, accept and reject specific sections, which is a pain. If you're trying to do, if you want to select something but you don't want to select something else. But yes, you can actually see the diff now. That was a change they made, I think, last month. And like I said, it abuses grep like crazy. I forgot who said this, but I think this is the best way to say it. It just keeps looking for things that it already knows. And I think having well thought out Claude.md files is probably the solution for this, or having really structured note taking is the solution to this, but it is something you have to right now manage. And the thing I'll say is a lot of people give up on these tools very because they don't just work right out of the box. And I understand that if you're busy, you're just like, I want it to work. But I think these problems are they're going to be addressed without a doubt, right? They will fix these problems. So if you get good at using these tools, whether it's Cursor or whether it's Claude Code, these things will go away over time. So I would say just give it another try if these were some of the reasons that you were not wanting to use it. All right, we have a lot of ground covered here, so let's go into the Claude.md file. So this file is your main context file. So when you run /init, and we'll get into what that means in a sec, it will generate an overview of your code base. It'll go through all your files, figure out how everything is set up, make detailed notes about the startup processes, where everything is located. And I like the quote from the documentation, which is that your Claude.md files become a part of Claude's prompts. I mean, that's what literally happens. So they should be refined like any frequently used prompt. So effectively, you have to think of it like a README specifically built for Claude Code. And it's easy to add to this. You can use the /memory command for that. To be totally honest with you, don't use this specific command that often because I can just go in and it just adds its appends nodes to the files. But it is easy to do it. And now let's get into the actual use of it. How do you set it up? I like to actually, the init function is great, but I have my own set of commands that I run, which I'll address later, where I ask it to go through every file and first of all extract the file structure and the folder structure. Then for each of those folders, I have a new Claude.md file. So in each subfolder, I have a Claude.md file. And effectively, you can create detailed notes for every single detailed readmes, for every single subfolder, to the point where you can track every single function and file. And then when Claude needs to do an operation, it's no longer grepping like crazy. You can have it just look at those Claude.md files. As long as they're updated, it will drastically reduce how much cognitive load it's taking on, basically. And this, I guess this is a hack of some kind, but really it's just like a good practice. If you do this constantly, you'll get a lot of use out of the Claude Code. Yeah.
So by default, it'll pick up Claude.md in the folder that it's in.
Yeah.
And are you doing an analysis code with your own kind of automated process to write the Claude.md, or are you writing
I'll get to that. But there's a /init function, which I'll get to one of these slash functions that does this exact process. Yeah.
So the Claude.md file, is it more like a PDB or is it more like the cursor, rules file? Like how do I?
It's kind of a mix. It's more like it's like a, cursor rules are effectively prompts that go into cursor, right? So but it's also a README of your entire code base, so it can act as both. And sorry, I'll have to go through this quickly because we have about 5 minutes left for this set of presentations. But here's a good example of what I have in my actual Claude.md files, right? So this is like the main, I have a back end and a front end. So I said, okay, here's how it's set up. I have my front end has this kind of setup, my back end has this kind of setup, and I have it cover the front end structure, which actually then also has a much more detailed list in the front end folder itself. Then I have my back end structure, which is in the back end folder, but in more detail. But I can extract those up into my project folder or company folder, so it's easy for me to also see, but also easy for like if I have to run thing cross code base or cross repo, it's a lot easier to manage that. And some other MD files that are not as talked about, I feel, but are very useful, are things like the changelog. If you have a good changelog, it's easy for Claude to, over time, realize what were the changes that were made and why. So every time you make a change, just ask it to update the changelog separately from the Claude.md file, and that just gives it a good understanding of, okay, here's why I changed it, and here's why we shouldn't go back to doing this. I use a plan.md file for every new project that I start or every new task that I start. It's effectively the list of things that I actually want to get done in a single document. And I know I'm going really fast, but we'll cover everything, don't worry. All right, now here's the one major thing that I want to touch upon that I think is really interesting. You can attach Claude Code into your GitHub repo. This basically replaces the need for well, I have never used Devin, so I can't speak for it. But effectively it is Devin, but using your Anthropic key to an extent. It's super easy to set up. You just run this command. They automate everything for you. There is no hassle. And then you can go in and create an issue. Like I had some project I wanted to do. So I was like, all right, create this component for the library, and I tag Claude, like I would tag some developer. And it goes in, it creates the issue, it creates this to-do list, this checklist, executes that, and later, when I actually am like, hey, this was like not that great, I can just tag it again in the PR like I would with an actual developer, and it'll go through and do that again. It does take money, does cost a little bit more because it's using your API key, but it's super worth it. I can do way more things using this process than I can just on my own computer running one agent or even multiple agents at the same time. It's extremely convenient. It also has, Claude Code has built-in commands like review, PR comments that allow you to effectively automate the review process from your console, fetching the comments so that it can then operate in your local environment. This is more useful for teams, I feel, compared to like a solo or small shop, but these commands are built in. I would really recommend exploring them. And just to demonstrate this, I once texted in the Slack, like, I could just run 30 different commands at the same time. I use Claude Code to say, here's a list of all the features I want to build, generate PRs for every single one of these, and make sure you tag Claude at the end of it so that it will spin off the job. And it was able to do that. This is in my phone. Like by the time I got home, it was all complete. It was just amazing.
This is with the integration with GitHub or just
Yes.
on the CLI?
No, from the CLI, you can integrate it into GitHub. Yeah, so it's effectively an app that's running there, but it is the Claude Code bot. And now we'll get to commands. All right, so commands are, hold on a minute. You should use this software. The speed of this presentation doesn't represent how great the software is, but this is irrelevant ad, just in the middle to capture your attention. Anyway, this is, for example, this is what a command is. A command is just a prompt. It's just a prompt that you can save in a file, share amongst projects, share amongst your team, and you can develop these like very comprehensive step-by-step things. And don't worry, you don't have to take pictures because this is all available on that website. I'll show you later. And you can actually run it just like you would the PR, the install GitHub that were built in from Claude. You can write your own. And why this is great is because you might have specific things you want your team to know, or somebody on your team is just a Claude expert or an AI prompt expert. They write something amazing. You can now share that with the entire team. It's super easy to use. I won't go into where to set up. It's all on their website, but you should really look into using commands which allow you to create these comprehensive workflows just using a prompt that Claude can then easily follow. This is, for example, the code base analyze prompt that I can use to set up my really, really comprehensive analysis in a Claude.md file. And you can see it's super long, but it works.
Where is this? Where can we find this?
Oh, don't worry, I'm getting to that. Okay. And we might have to speed through some of the parts at the end here, but basically Claude can do this. I even made a GitHub action that can then be run, right from your GitHub interface. And this is just all the commands that I've collected. Anyway, here's the website and QR code if you're interested. I'll have it up at the end or in the presentations later. And I've just made it really easy to add this. Disclaimer is that I made this, but I really do believe it's a really good way to share those ideas. I think we can just kind of skim through these planning and sub-agents. There's a planning step that you can, looks like my time's up, folks. There's a planning mode that allows you to go through with Claude and think through the things you want to actually execute. This is like when they play the music at the Oscars. Yeah. All right. You can also launch sub-agents. If you're just starting off with Claude Code, don't even think about this, but just you can basically run two things at the same time. It's pretty cool. All right, well, that was it. Basically, I think I've hammered all the point. Let's successfully connect this computer so other people can go as well. But
so the analyzer command was the command you were talking about to generate the Claude.md files.
That's one I use to make a more comprehensive Claude.md file. Yeah. But you don't. It can just be to analyze the code base in general.
Are there any more scoping considerations for Claude.md files or ways to scope rules for Claude that mean you don't get context for it, like you don't kind of have an overload of context? If you have a lot of rules, that's a problem in Cursor.
Yeah, you can actually take your commands, and Patrick, I'll have it come up here in the meantime, but you can take your commands and actually just put subcommands in there, references to other files in there, which would allow you to kind of reduce the scope of things that it has to look at.
Hey everybody, my name is Patrick. I have been using Claude Code since it came out back in February 24th, which feels like forever ago. But it's been amazing to see just the constant evolution of new features. One of the coolest things I feel like with Claude Code, and I'll mention this in a second here, is how the Anthropic team very obviously works very closely together on the ML and AI side. So the actual machine learning researchers that are doing the post-training and the fine-tuning and everything, along with the actual product team. So you see this close coupling with Claude Code that I think really sets it apart from any other experience. I was just listening to the Klein founders on the Latent Space podcast. Excellent recommendation, by the way, that podcast episode and just the podcast overall. And they were talking about how Opus 4 and Sonnet 4 just so badly want to use bash commands to grep around, as Anand was speaking to. So there's a whole realm of preferred bits of what Opus 4 and Sonnet 4 try to do that fit really, really well with Claude Code, given that the application and machine learning teams are speaking closely together. So that's one reason why Claude Code is fantastic to use. But I'll speak a little bit to the fundamentals of Claude Code. So what makes this more exciting and interesting, and thus all the hype recently over a Cursor or other platform? From my perspective, the biggest pieces here are we're doing much more than just code gen. We're really working with one of the first in production agentic tools that can do multi-step processing on the order of roughly an hour or so. Of course, takes a lot of work to get it to be able to run for that length of time, but capable from a fundamental perspective. So you can think a lot broader than just code gen in terms of applications for this, which I'll get to a few of my favorite non-coding workflows in a second here. But I think just feeling the character, the nature, what helps these agents run for longer and to get more accurate towards what we're actually trying to execute with them. all of these factors are really, really helpful lessons for us to be learning and internalizing now as we're building agentic workflows in other domains, in our own products, or using tools such as Gemini to summarize YouTube videos or whatever other workflows we might have. So that's one amazing part of Claude Code, is to get exposure and to see how, in my opinion, the best execution of that, given the tight coupling between the machine learning and product teams, like what that actually looks like in practice. So Claude is also fine-tuned for, as I mentioned, tools that Claude Code takes great advantage of. There's a couple other bits here. So you've got the bash type commands. So being able to grep your code base and use the GH or GitHub CLI tool. That's another tool it's incredibly competent at using. But we also have the native into Claude Code tooling. So web search, file search. One of my favorite bits is this to-do list. Back in the day, I'd always create these PRDs, which is still a helpful workflow. But for most things, I can just defer to Claude Code, doing the shift tab to get it into planning mode, think through and iterate on the spec of what we're trying to accomplish, and then allow it to create a little to-do list to kind of keep it on track, especially when it's handing off between different steps and using sub-agents to summarize different parts of the code base or think through and do research. Being able to pull that back and keep grounded in the to-do list, even its little like 6-bullet to-do list, is super, super helpful. A few other tools, such as its ability to reflect on what it's outputting, is an absolute game changer. I see this happen quite a bit, where it'll work through something and be like, wait a second, this actually isn't the best approach to this, or this assumption was mistaken. And that ability, as you can imagine, when you're trying to let it run on a task and come back in 15 minutes or whatever to verify the output, is super helpful. It's just one less touch point, and usually multiple less touch points that you're having to go in and babysit the model for, in addition to the output just being much better with that reflection piece. So there's a number of reasons why that pairing of Opus 4 specifically, but Sonnet 4 as well, with Claude Code is a really incredible and productive workflow. One note too, when you're using Claude Code, if you run /model, you can choose Sonnet versus Opus. So just in case you're not aware of that, the default is Sonnet. Opus is 4 times more expensive, but if you're on the max plan, it's which is a $100 or $200 a month plan, which I'd highly recommend. The amount of inference we get is ridiculous. I mean, I would estimate if I'm fully using Claude in a month, it's in the order of $3 to $5K in terms of like API costs, but it's $200 a month flat. So I don't know how long this is going to be around, or if they're going to try to water it down like Cursor or others. Yeah, the rumors are the last week they've watered down the Pro plan, which we'll see. A lot of people on X were mentioning that, so hopefully that's not the case. But allegedly it's not from their team, but you never know. Okay, so I wanted to mention the different types of agents to just give a quick overview. We've got, of course, chat-based agents, which we're all familiar with: ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. We also have these CLI and IDE-based agents. Claude Code, of course, being an example. Cursor, Windsurf, the brand new Kiro from AWS or Amazon, Klein, etc. And then we have background agents, which are just starting to kind of roll out over the last couple of months. So Codex, which also has a CLI tool, but of course they've got, with OpenAI's Pro plan at least, you can kick off agentic processes that will run anywhere from 1 to 4 different instances of O3 to basically try to resolve and come to a solution on whatever you prompt it, which could be informational or it could be an actual task that you're trying to complete. And then I would also loop the GitHub integration, which I won't belabor since Anand talked about it, but it's incredible. Also, one of our friends, Sam, just walked me through this absolutely mind-blowing workflow that he's got, where he's got 3. He basically took the integration that you can build with Claude Code with GitHub. So it's like a GitHub integration or something like that. If you just type GitHub, it'll pop up. And then he modified the YAML file, because basically what it's doing is it's just creating a YAML file that's a GitHub action configuration file, and then you can add additional details. So you can modify the prompt that it's running. I would highly recommend uncomment the model it uses so that you can use Opus instead of Sonnet, the default, which is it's in there as a default. You just have to uncomment it. And also, they just pushed OAuth support, so you can use your Max plan, which is amazing as of like a couple days ago, which is a brand new thing I just learned about and had to re-go through the integration flow in order to get that set up. So with this, you can add additional parameters, for example, basically sneaking MCPs into your config file, and also give it access and point it to, and give it permission to use different bash tooling, and then give it access to other configuration files, like markdown files. So all this to say, just through that GitHub integration, there's a lot you can really squeeze out of it to essentially create, as Anand was saying, a Devon type experience, but with much more control and with better models.
Specifically with the GitHub integration, how does it handle, like, let's say you have a front-end application and starting it after testing those changes. What have you kind of seen there?
In terms of like validating the output of, so I haven't built this into the workflow. I do use Netlify, so I get automatically triggered builds, which can fail or pass. The code review, as Anand was showing, like you can kick it off and then just at Claude, which is technically a separate agent, get a second Claude instance to go through, look at that code review or any other feedback you give it, and then make a follow-up commit or whatever you're asking it to do. All this to say that Claude agent has context for the text thread that just happened. So I could create a second runner based off of that Claude code review integration that looks for tests failing or passing. I'm assuming. I haven't tested this myself. And then based off of that, instruct follow-up commits or just alerting the user or whatever you want to do from there. But anything you can do with the GitHub action, I mean, that's all that this integration is, but with OAuth to your Max plan. So it's very versatile. And I mean, there are other ways to go about this too, not within GitHub Actions, but I feel like that's a very approachable and easy way to experiment with just modifying little workflows. What's also so cool about this is, as Anand was saying, you can embed any process that you have internally around like amazing ways to go about code review. And also based on the user that's submitting the PR, you can you could change things up as well. So you could really get these parts of your workflow embodied within these commands or these runners. And that's one thing I love about Claude Code and also MCPs is being able to encapsulate these different workflows that we have internally, which even just as one dev, it's helpful, but across the team, incredibly helpful to embody that knowledge and that ability to be super productive and hand that off to less junior folks that don't have to understand all the underlying details. So we have background agents, again, GitHub integration being what I would consider part of that. And then kind of connected, but separately a little bit more advanced, is our agent swarms. These are really cool. It's basically spinning off a bunch of containers. Codex is essentially this, where you can go from 1 to 4. If you have 4 of them running at the same time, you've got all these agents running, and then they're coming up with a solution, and then you can compare either manually or through LLM as judge. My friend Sam was walking me through this workflow, as I was mentioning, where he's got 3 Opus instances that kick off, and then they've got acceptance criteria that they can look at for what good code looks like, different style guides, examples of like API documentation and API spec standards, and it will compare outputs against that, and an LLM will choose which version of those 3 outputs it likes the best, and then we'll automatically merge that in, build a CI/CD pipeline, and then he can review it at that point. So you can get pretty sophisticated with the swarm idea. That's a more basic version. And then at the AI Engineer World's Fair that a few of us went to down in SF about a month ago, we saw examples of, hundreds of these containers, being kicked off. Now, of course, that's would bankrupt me with Opus 4, but it's exciting to think about. And then, of course, non-engineering agents as well, such as Manus and Deep Research and others we're familiar with. My favorite, Claude Code in the CLI and also in headless mode. They've got an SDK for TypeScript, Python, and then, of course, just in the CLI as well, which is really helpful. You can imagine you've got this little intelligence that you can pipe things into in your terminal. You can put it in your build pipeline. You can have it review and build all kinds of different stuff that's like right where you're at or within your application. And I think kind of thinking about Claude Code not as just a code gen tool, but as this agent that you can deploy in a bunch of different contexts is really powerful. And the additional SDK that they just came out with, the Python and TypeScript ORMs or wrappers are really helpful to make that more easy. I also love Gemini CLI. Very similar to Claude Code. Doesn't have the magic from my perspective. Again, I think the Anthropic team is just amazing, sitting between the like what they hand off from the model's capability to the product, and that's so important. But for other tasks, one of the coolest ones I found was somebody using Gemini to to basically watch a YouTube video, which they can see 1 frame a second, and they have, of course, the transcript as well through Google's first-party integration with their YouTube tool, which is really, really helpful. I do this all the time. Even before I watch like an hour talk, I'll just summarize it in like just Gemini, Gemini.google.com, and we'll basically get a sense of what it's talking about. Or if like for this talk, there was one detail I remembered from a Claude talk, but I didn't want to go through the entire hour to try to find it. I just quickly asked like, hey, I remember this point, like roughly speaking, where is the time code for this? And it pulled it up. Super helpful. And this is just one workflow with YouTube, but super helpful. Another cool one though is with the Gemini CLI, you can take a tutorial and then have it try to execute and build that locally on your computer if it's something that would be doable from like a command line or using different tooling that you're exposed to it. So very versatile. I don't use it for coding. I will use it for summarizing code bases and creating markdown files with that summary, a few of the other workflows I just mentioned, and for the second brain workflow, which I'll go into if I've got time, but it's really fun. And then of course the custom GitHub action runners for code review or agentic uses with Claude Code is really helpful. Also, Nod, if you could just let me know when I'm getting close. Oh, 5 minutes? Oh, wow, okay. Sweet. Okay, so what agents need for great performance? Context. Context is everything. Context truly is everything. As you guys probably know, prompt engineering just got rebranded to context engineering, given that what we fit into the model, what we give them, the analogy I pulled from, I believe it was the Anthropic CPO, who's also the Instagram founder, but the way he was talking about it is, imagine you're Claude Code, you wake up, you're in this box, and all you have is what some person just handed you, i.e. the prompt. It's going to be extremely hard to do anything productive with that if you've got limited context, limited tooling. So giving the context of the code base, architectural style, what our preferred libraries are, different like UI mocks and style guides. I mean, anything that can help it understand like examples of good output and bad output, what it needs to do, along with that evals or ways to evaluate the output. So again, examples of good and bad. Linters are super helpful. I mean, I just have it run ESLint every time it's doing anything because that just saves me a ton of time. And again, you just want to keep that agentic loop going as long as you can and give it as much feedback in real time as possible. Any standards, so around commits and branch naming, for example, acceptance criteria, automated tests, and then also tools. So different MCPs are the easiest way to expose these, but also the built-in web search and Bash, GitHub CLI. There's a lot of other tools you can give these models to perform and do much better. There's a lot beyond engineering too that these agents are great at. So second brain, which is basically like a methodology around storing all of your personal knowledge or like personal knowledge management in like note taking, which can be really helpful along with different computer administrative tasks. So like naming screenshots based off of the content and what's in there, organizing files automatically, of course, pipe operator. Also, there's a MCP for Blender, which is really fun to create 3D models. I haven't used it myself, but I've seen some amazing demos. So I'm getting close to time, so I'll just really quickly go through the rest of the slides here. And I'll share these in the Slack as well. But different types of MCPs that can be really helpful. These are the main categories of functionally the type of MCP. These are some of the best registries of MCPs where you can find them.
On Playwright, have you successfully got Playwright to like look at your render in Next.js and have it fix rendering issues like refreshes?
One thing I'll say on Playwright, which I think is getting to your question, is there are two modes. It's got a vision mode, and then it's got like a default mode. And you want to add its tac vision is how you get it as an arg that you have to pass in. If you go to the Microsoft Playwright documentation, it'll explain this. Then it will use actual screenshots versus just looking at the accessibility map. And that makes a huge difference in terms of actually getting, if that's what your question was.
I haven't found an MCP that necessarily captures the loading of an app because it's not just screenshots, it's like there are tons of bugs in React, right? Or bugs, there's like behaviors with React that are terrible for users that end up happening when you kind of just throw a lot of code together.
Yeah.
And fixing it is hard, and I figured there's some way to do it if you have some MCP that's going to load it and then kind of output, the progress to some format that can be read by an LLM, but I don't know what that is yet.
I don't have a good solution to this. One thought though is maybe having an input breakpoints to get it to kind of pause at different UI states and then take a screenshot is maybe one interesting approach just to throw out there, but it's a great question. All right, I'm out of time, unfortunately. I'll share these slides though. There's a lot of stuff in here that I'm really passionate about, but I want to make sure we have time here.
I'm going to go kind of both high level and low level with how to think about Claude Code, because I was a software engineer in about 2011. I was employable, like I could have gotten a job, and I haven't touched it since then. But I use Claude Code every day, and I have built a full app, and it works mostly, and it only has a couple of total disasters that I have not backed out of because I don't want to spend a day backing out of them, and it works, it's fine. So big picture, I can't believe we didn't cover this yet. This is what you want to do every time you are using Claude Code on the command line. How many of you actually use Claude Code, have used it? You've all used it, okay, so you know this. So hopefully I'll give you something a little more interesting. But explore, plan, execute. If you jump straight to execute, I do this sometimes. I'm like, this is gonna be so easy. Claude is dumb and it will screw it up. I actually find that Sonnet 4 with thinking hard is better than Opus for a lot of tasks, and it's faster. But you know, your task complexity may be different than mine. So if you're doing like super hard, like I'm just doing dumb, like regular web development-y kind of stuff, Sonnet's great at that and it's faster, and when it's thinking, it's a lot smarter, and Opus just burns through, like I get kicked out of my max plan all the time. So every day, 10 to 20 new contractors work on my code base, and they show up knowing absolutely nothing. They're super good software engineers, or pretty good. Their documentation's like 6 months out of date. They think like, yeah, like OpenAI has the best models 01, and like that it's rate limited to 5 calls per minute or something. That was today. So I need them to explore and build up some context. So my goal is to make Claude spend tokens to build up context. You can read the markdown file. Mine's never up to date. Or it reads it and it starts, you know, imagine you read 300 lines about like how someone's code base works, and they're like, now build this. You're gonna mess something up. So prepare to work on this. Claude starts with an idea of what it's gonna work on, and it's like, okay, it's just like you, like all of you. You're like, okay, you start reading and then you're like, okay, I know how to build this. And you stop reading and you're like, I'm ready to build. If you're like, read the code, it will read a little bit more. But if you're like, prepare to discuss how our front end works, Claude will spend 50,000 tokens over 7 minutes just being like, okay. And then it'll give you a nice overview of how it works. And when you do that, Claude is much smarter. And if the overview is wrong, escape, or /clear, start over. Don't try to correct, you can try to correct it, I do it sometimes it works. But you're just basically chewing through tokens in your context window, trying to push back on somebody on a bad contractor. Just fire the contractor, get a new one.
If it is wrong, what else do you put in there to make it right the second time? You just like rerun it and see if
Just rerun it. It's gonna reuse a bunch of sub-agents, it's gonna get it right. It's gonna be right 9 out of 10 times. This is a great, gambling game. And you just, when you lose, you're not like, oh, why did I lose? You're like, no, I win almost all the time. So for this, I like think. You know, like these are your thinking modes. And I really wish that Claude had, for Explore, you're gonna waste a lot of tokens if you're thinking harder or thinking hardest. I really wish their max plan matched this, and that we had Claude think, Claude hard, Claude harder. Oh, this is back, see, Claude screwed this up. Claude hardest, and Claude Ultra is not even available yet. That's the $1,000 a month plan. But I want Claude. I want to pay my $200 a month for a Claude hardest. So this is my an example of just like read. So I will say I make just markdown files. I have Claude write them. So talk about how our architecture works and then make a checklist of this is what we're working on. This is an old one, obviously. Don't write any code. This is maybe if you have a PR, consider the next one, review, read relevant. But I actually think this is a lot better. We're gonna work on the document identification part of the app, dig in, read relevant files, prepare to discuss the ins and outs of how it works. So I can look right here, I don't have to look up there. So sometimes I'll follow up with questions just to make sure it actually has the context. And often I will double escape to remove that from the context if I think it's doing a good job, just because I burn, I like my context window to be a lot of room in the context window. So double escape. How many of you use double escape with Claude? Okay, you should use this all the time. So I just spent 7 minutes building up context. This contractor's really good at this. I can double escape and just fork the conversation. Like I can have it do a bunch of work, double escape and go back to this same point where they have all this context. Saves me money and time. Like mostly like I won't get kicked out of my max plans as quickly, and mostly just like I don't have to sit there and wait and maybe get a bad gamble. If you get a smart Claude, you should keep it and reuse it over and over and over. So this is what it looks like. You double escape and you can just go back to any previous conversation. I think you should talk to Claude and all AIs like you talk to people. If you like practice being a jerk online, you become a jerk in real life. You should just be nice to everyone. And this is even more fun, resume. Do you know this one? So this is a crazy branching multiverse. So you can open up a new tab. You just built up a bunch of context. Open up a new tab, hit resume, and you get all that context in the new tab in terminal. So you can do like 5 terminals, all with all of that exact amazing front end or back end or API context. You can ask a couple of questions and start there, wherever you want. It's really fun. So resume, yeah, there you go. Just don't do this and then start like having it write 3 different things on the front end. Go.
Do you prefer like Git work trees or just different directories, or how do you go about?
I prefer to not work on more than 2 tasks at a time because my brain gets fried. I end up with 15 tabs open. I go back to a tab, I'm like, wait, what's that tab? And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot make this decision right now. This is like, why did I even start down this path? I think I do have 3 Git work trees. Since I'm solo, I just have like 2 work trees, which is just like your entire Git library, like in a parallel case. And I will just like merge them into master. I just keep them open. They're just sitting there because I don't care. I don't use Git appropriately. So plan, I don't use plan mode. The 3 or 4 times I've tried, it like didn't do as good a plan as me asking it to do a plan. I like to think hardest. This is where you really have to think. Claude needs to think hard to plan. So this is my like generic instructions. I really like this. Write the function names in 1 to 3 sentences about what they do. Write the test names 5 to 10 words like about the behavior they cover, but really the short overview. Because Claude's default for plan is often like, here's a bunch of code that I'm gonna write. And you're like, no, I want you to think higher level than that. I want you to tell me conceptually what you're doing. Because when you start doing code like that, you're starting to get into the weeds and you're not thinking architecturally. And I can't tell it what to do architecturally because I'm a terrible developer and I don't know, like I only know that like the places in my code base where the smells are bad, but I'm not telling you like I have a lot of code. I don't know where it all is. Or I don't know what it all does. So this is a different example I have. Like I actually have built up this whole system for adding new PDF types. So I have like a whole system where I like basically take a PDF and I throw it at Gemini. But I have different types and I have different verifications I want to run on them. I just have it read a couple of guides and then I just let this run. So there's no context in this. I can just put this into GitHub and then I go to Claude and I'm like, do GH issue 140, close it when you're done. And then I just hit like auto accept, goodbye. So risk-based planning, if it's small, don't overthink, just write the code. Medium to large, you gotta break it into like testable, deployable PRs. And I think of this in terms of context windows, you know, and that's like about a PR sized, for me, it's about a PR sized chunk of work. And then high risk, I think you should take 3 shots at the plan, 2 or 3 shots. You should really work over it like with Claude. I'm not making the plan again. Like I'm just looking at its plan and I'm like, this smells bad. Like this is a terrible, like if an engineer came to me, you are an engineer, you're coming to me with this, like, I'm like, this is really complicated. It's gonna be like, you're gonna screw it up. It's gonna mess up the code base. So once I've done the plan, I open up a new tab, pull up that same amazing context, but don't dive into the plan. Don't get it, like once it's made the plan, it's not gonna critique itself. But if you go back to the amazing context and you're like, yo, my developer came up with this plan to do this. Claude's like, yeah, all right, let me tell you about this plan. I'm with you, I'm on your team, not on your developer's team. If you're like, I came up with this plan, it'll like tell you a lot of nice stuff. It'll be like, great job, you did a great plan. Here's a couple little things you might do differently, But this case, it's going to be like, yeah, your developer, you know, like, I don't know, I wouldn't have done it that way. And try to get specific. If you're just like, they made this plan, it's like, it's not going to do a good job. But so ask the questions you would ask yourself. So get feedback on the plan. You can have 2 Claudes make the plan. You can have a 3rd Claude decide between them. I tend to put them into Markdown and have Claude work on them. And then I have it break them up into PR-sized chunks. And then we execute. And those PR-sized chunks, you might as well use that same context that you've already built up, because it's so valuable to have those 50,000 tokens about your database, or sorry, your app in the context window. It's going to write much better code than if you just like bring up a blank Claude with 200 lines of the Claude.md. So pull up that 50,000 token context window, say, work on PR1. This is my example prompt. Think hard, write elegant code that completes this. This is a real big one. It loves backwards compatibility, which I don't. I'm like, no, and it's like, we'll have graceful fallbacks. And I'm like, no, that's just junk that will break. And then it will gracefully fall back. When you say that, that means to me that the app is going to silently fail, and I will not know about it, because it will just start leaning on some old code that you should be deleting. You can tell where I get frustrated with Claude. So I try to, this is a little overkill, like the testing and sometimes, but I think linting, compiling, and writing corresponding tests is good. For really simple stuff, I actually just say like do TDD. And it writes the test, it writes the failing test, it writes the code that makes the test pass, and it does a great job. It's really good at it. TDD is terrible. When I did code, I remember trying it for like a week and being like, I fucking hate TDD. This is just like, this is worse than writing tests. So I like thinking hard, or think, for this. I have Claude write lots of scripts to check its own work. So like, I gave it a script to call Gemini with PDFs, or I had it write that script. And now I'm like, test to make sure that like when you verify, like you created a new markdown file that verifies PDFs, make sure it actually works and it verifies with this one. Or if you need to view a PDF file, Claude's terrible at that, it can't do it. Ask Gemini or ask Unstruct. It will give you a markdown file, go, look at that, then you can read it and understand what's going on, and you can like figure out what to do. Let's see. Once you're writing the code, this is a big question: to watch or not to watch. Do you like, because Claude will make, in my case, like 1 out of 10 to 20 times, it's going to start copying code and just doing some dumb stuff. And I'm not going to look at the commit. I'm going to watch it as it goes, pretty much, or I'm not going to watch it at all. I'm going to be like, commit it. It works. It's good. So I've seen 200 lines of copied code go through. I have a weird config that's in 5 different places in my app, and I'm just like, every time I'm like, Claude, could we just put this config into one place? And it's like, oh yeah, here's a plan. And I'm like, all right, you're stupid. Like this, okay, this is harder than it looks, I guess. Return true was a 3.7 problem. You will not get that anymore. But usually if you just hit go, like you kind of get a feel for it. I have a feel for it now where I'm like, this is an easy enough thing for Claude just to do. Go. Shift, tab, puts it onto autocomplete. I don't know if you all have heard how this came to be, like why we have amazing coding agents now, but it's because of RL, and it's because once you move up the tech tree enough where models can write good compilable code, you can actually then start to give them coding problems and figure out if, like, basically they have to be able to create the solution like 80% of the time, or tasks, like the way that they did thinking was they were just like, write a bunch of stuff, and at the end, if you get the right answer, you get a cookie, and we're gonna reward that circuit. And if you don't get a cookie, right? And if so we got to like GPT-4 and Claude 3.5 level models, and you could start actually like turning thinking on, but because the models were good enough to get all the way through. But the problem is, like, you're creating software engineering problems, and you're just like, and they're verifiable. So like, write this code. Does it compile? Does it answer the right question at the end? Very easy to test back, right? But does that make for good edits? No, that makes for really good writing fresh new codes, new methods. Claude prefers that. I don't know if you've all noticed that, but you're like, in my case, you're probably, if you're editing stuff like cursor style, it doesn't matter. But in my case, I'm like, write this, edit the code, figure out where you can edit, because you really have to prompt that, because Claude is still really tuned into like okay, I'm gonna write some new code. This is gonna be fun. We're gonna do a new method, guys. Sorry, it got cut off here, but yeah. Claude 3.7 was like over RL'd on just like completing tasks, and they dialed that back. That's where the return true came from. But we still have this problem where Claude is like just trying to finish, like it's trying to finish tasks and get its cookie by writing new code, not by editing or elegantly integrating code. So then I go back to the developer thing, right? I lean on the developer. So I go back to the planner. So I have my planner tab open, and I'm just like, yo, my developer just finished step 2. Give them low-level like feedback and high-level feedback. If you don't say that, it's like, they did a great job. And then I get feedback, and then I go back to the developer, and I'm like, hey, I got this feedback. What do you think? And it's like, well, that's good feedback. Yeah, I'll do it. And this is the problem with like Claude. I don't know if you've hit the /review on Claude's own code. It's like, this code's great. Yeah, review doesn't, Claude likes Claude's code. I use this sometimes, but prepare. So I'm like at the end, as I'm running out of my context window, or we're finishing up the pull request, like, I say to Claude, like, you're not working on the next step of this, give advice to the next developer, put it in the markdown file. And Claude is usually like, you're off to an excellent start here. But it can be helpful. Context window management. I'm sure, do you all get this? I never compact anymore. Compact is a waste of time. It generates like a page and a half, and it tells Claude to read 4 files, and you're like, you end up with a very like kind of off-kilter, dumb Claude. So I just try to rewind. Once I get to 5%, I'm like, document what you've done, and we're rewinding back to 40%, and we're gonna like, and I'm gonna be like, here's what I've done so far. Continue.
Sorry, so you rewind instead of just wiping code clean?
Yeah, I hate compact. And yeah, starting with clear. Yeah, I mean, you could use clear, but then you don't have any context. And so and you can use resume to get that context back, or double escape. So like, why not use that? I mean, it is more expensive because you already have all that. Like I don't know that you're actually getting charged you only get new tokens, right? So you're not getting charged. It's much more expensive for them. But for us, it's just new tokens, so it's great. So you jump straight to execution. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. Other tips and tricks. I git merge. That's the problem with work trees, is I'm like, all right, we're gonna do this over here, we're gonna do this over here, and then we're merge them, and I'm like, oh, Jesus. Now we have a merge conflict, and I'm just like, Claude, deal with git. And it's like, okay. And it gets it right every time. I'm like, oh, should I like trust it? And I'm like, I don't know. Every time it works. I skip the ceremony for simple tasks, just like do it. Claude loves to be enterprise ready. Just, you have to fight that, because like it's built by an enterprise for enterprises. So, so this is one of my like, if it gave me a plan that's too bulky, I love this, and it's just like totally right, and it cuts it in half, and it makes it a much better plan for me. Explore, plan, execute, resume, my developer. And then Claude made up this joke at the end for me. I didn't add this, but I like it. It's a good one. All right, so that's my talk.